Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Guest today, Spencer Verhines. Spencer, it's really good to have you on. I appreciate you being here. And can you let us know, first of all, where you're calling in from and what you do for a living with American Classic Coffee?
Well, I'm in Colorado Springs, Colorado. The company, I started it back in 2019. I run the company, everything. I do everything right now. So it keeps me fairly busy.
Awesome. What kind of got you interested in the space? I mean, obviously you're a veteran, so thank you for your service, first of all. And you're in Colorado Springs. Were you an airman by chance, being at near the base there? Or?
I was in the Air Force. I was stationed up in Cheyenne, Wyoming for a while. That was a long time ago, but I've always loved Colorado. I've wanted to live here for quite some time. And when things got just too ridiculous out in California, I started talking to my wife about moving. We put a plan into place and just worked through the plan and got here.
That's awesome, man. So tell me a little bit, I guess, about like leading up to creating this brand. I mean, what were you trying to do differently with this coffee brand? What did you kind of find out there in the market that was problematic that you were trying to solve or trying to do a little bit differently with your brand?
Well, I offer high-grade specialty coffee. There are a lot of specialty coffee companies out there, but when I got into coffee, I didn't know anything about coffee, right? I really didn't. I knew I liked vanilla creamer with it, but I didn't know about that different grades of coffee. And then when I learned about that, they were all coming from companies that just didn't appeal to me whatsoever, right? Didn't appeal to me. The names of the coffee, the name of the company, very trendy names. And I'm not a trendy person. I never will be, right? And neither will my company. So I wanted to provide a high grade of coffee at a fair price. Something that when you're working 50, 60, 70 hours a week, or even 30 hours a week, it's not going to break your budget to buy it, but you're getting that really good coffee. And it's the experience. Whenever I first found out about specialty coffee, I tasted the coffee and just was blown away. Because I've been drinking coffee that was, well, really bitter and tasted horrible. That's why I use creamer, right? I did that for years because I just couldn't stand the taste of it. But specialty coffee was a whole new world. So I wanted to offer really good coffee at a fair price to people like me.
That's amazing. No, I love that. And I kind of have the same experience. I mean, growing up in New York, obviously, coffee is like a cultural thing around here. Everybody drinks coffee. I was always a cream and sugar guy in my coffee too, because it was the same thing. I mean, like black coffee was just like, taste wasn't great. I mean, I was going to like the local gas station to pick up my coffee on my way to work. Like that's pretty much all I ever did. And I'll be honest, it's not something I've ever really like delved into myself. I've never really played around with specialty coffees or like tried to find anything better. What would you say is kind of like the main like differences? Like, I mean, everything you've learned like about, more in depth about coffee now, like what makes something like, a specialty coffee or something like you make different in its like, flavor profile and like the things that go into making it and roasting it that makes it so much different?
Well, it starts out with how it's grown. So your specialty coffees are grown in typically higher elevations, better soil. There could be, at the higher elevations, usually less oxygen, less water, because it's snow, rains, goes downhill. So it doesn't have time to soak that up. How it's processed can affect the flavors. How it's roasted can affect the flavors. But what was really important to me was selecting coffee that people would like with, oh goodness, I don't know how to say. I guess what I'm looking for, when I was looking for coffee, I wanted to find flavors I was familiar with. Right? Chocolate, hazelnut, caramel, right? Things like that I can relate to, kind of know what that stuff tastes like, other foods and other drinks. But with coffee, what really did it for me was tasting those flavors. I'd take a sip of coffee, take a drink, and then I'd taste that flavor. And knowing that it's coming from the bean itself was just awesome. Because I tried the flavored coffees, the vanillas, the chocolates, or whatever you're going to buy at the grocery store. And it just tasted horrible to me. I didn't like it at all. So stayed away from that and just stuck with the regular black with creamer until I found specialty coffee. And that opened up a whole new world to me. It's kind of just air conditioning for the first time.
I love that comparison. That's awesome.
It's true.
Yeah. So you're kind of going for like just a really high quality, familiar flavors, not overbearing, artificial stuff. Like, yeah, that definitely makes sense. And so where do you kind of find those, like that type of sourcing for coffee? Like what regions of the world do you typically source your stuff from? Where have you found to be kind of the best for what you're going for?
Central and South America, Ethiopia, Asia, I'm not going to get into specifics, but in those regions.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I guess I'm curious too, like, in your inception in 2019, when you first started selling and when your launch was, what was your kind of general like go-to-market strategy? Did you start selling online? Did you start selling like local, like do you have a brick and mortar store? What was kind of the start for you?
Well, I started the company because I was working for a really good company in energy services, and I was field account rep, but I was traveling 4 nights a week, and I'd done that for quite a while, and it was starting to just be too much, right? I have a family, and I don't like being away from them. So when I left that job, I lost the job. I didn't want to go back to work for anyone else. I was a member of a coffee subscription service, and I thought, well, how are they doing this? And I got the idea of maybe they're contract roasters. Because again, I didn't know at this time, I didn't know about specialty coffee. I thought maybe they're contract roasters. When I got out of the Air Force, I started a web design company. This is back in the 90s. And there were contract host companies, virtual hosts. So I thought, well, maybe coffee roasting has similar things. So I found out that there were, called a bunch of them, ordered samples, and started just diving into the world of coffee, right? So instead of going to work for someone else, I drove for Uber. I'd been driving for Uber part-time for several years. I decided to go full-time and drive. But this time I was going to do 5 days a week, 12 hours a day. Easy week, right? I asked my wife, I said, look, hon, I can either get a job, just going to work, coming home, get a check every 2 weeks, benefits, the security and safety of that, or I can start a business. I think I know what I want to do. I want to take a bet on myself. She said, well, can you pay the bills driving for Uber? Because I told her that was how I would do it. And I said, yeah. She said, then start the business. And that's all I needed. When my wife showed me that she had confidence in me, that's all it took. And I did a deep dive into coffee. I listened to coffee podcasts and a couple TED Talks that are out there nonstop for days. And then after contacting the contract roasters and getting the samples, I set up focus groups on Facebook, had everybody sign an NDA, sent out the samples all numbered, and got the feedback on the coffees they liked the best and chose the one closest to me. There was one they chose that everybody liked the most, but he was 5 hours north of me. And the close second, I mean, it was just barely, right? Really just barely, was 30 minutes away. So I went with him. I've been working with them this whole time. So that was 2019. I didn't know anything about coffee. I knew some about business and starting a business, but really I'm a fly by the seat of your pants kind of person. When I learned about web development, it's because I taught myself everything I needed to know about it and web design hosting. I didn't go to school for that stuff, right? I mean, I ended college working toward a computer science degree, but I was a cop in the Air Force and I was getting a degree in criminal justice. Was going to be in law enforcement. And then I changed directions. So with coffee, I didn't know anything about branding, label design, bags. I didn't know any of that stuff. I had to learn every bit of it. I had a concept in my mind about what I wanted to name the company, and I love my country. I wanted to do something that honored America and honored entrepreneurship. I love the mountains, so that's why the mountains are in the logo. I love the flag, obviously. And I wanted something that was just American. I know coffee's not really grown in America except for Hawaii, and I think a farm in California by Santa Barbara. But, hard work, rugged individualism, stick-to-itness. You get knocked down, you pull yourself up, and you go and you do the same hard things, and you just make it happen for the people that are depending on you. That's kind of the American dream as I see it. And you create that life that you want to create, that you want to provide for your family. So that's the idea behind the company. American Classic Coffee. My grandfather loved coffee. My grandpa Seba, he was my idol. He was an entrepreneur. He's a veteran, war veteran from World War II. I don't think he ever took a day off in his life, really, he took vacations. I'm not talking about that. He never slacked. He was always hardworking, doing something, owning several businesses and working a full-time job. So when I created the company, that's kind of the idea behind it. I wanted to provide a really good product and really good service and make it something that people can afford and not have to go, oh gosh, do I buy that or do I just get this other one off the shelf over here? And I never want someone to regret their purchase, ever. I don't ever want that to happen. If it does happen, if I find out about it, I will make it right, regardless of what it takes. Because I don't want them to buy my coffee, taste it, and not feel comfortable enough or feel about it that they can't just go and say, hey, you got to try this. It's good stuff. Or, yeah, try this brand. If they can't say that, then I want to make it right somehow. And whatever that means to them, I'll do it if it's within reason, obviously. I'm not going to do something ridiculous, but it's all about honoring the entrepreneur or that person that doesn't own a business, but they go and they work hard every every day for the people that depend on them. And I want to provide something that makes that job that they hate or that work condition they don't really like, it's something maybe just a little easier to deal with, I guess.
Something to have there, just kind of look forward to in your daily life. I mean, coffee is such a big part of your daily routine. I mean, whether it's in the morning or you have your afternoon coffee or whatever you like to do. I think it's something that you can give people something to look forward to. Maybe their circumstances aren't 100% like maybe the way that they'd like it to be. Just to have something to wake up to and have that smell and that experience in the mornings, just to get your day going is, the coffee exists that way for me. And it's not even anything special. I mean, it's just like the same old stuff of my parents drank that's in like the big tin can. But even still, I mean, it's a big part of my life and it's something I look forward to every day when I'm going to bed. So I can't wait to smell that coffee when it turns on, because I know it's going to turn on at 6 and I wake up at 6:30. I can't wait to wake up and smell that, right? So no, it's amazing, man. I love that story. I love your passion for what you're doing. I think it's really important. I'm sure, as you know, being an entrepreneur of a growing brand, I mean, if you don't have that passion, you're probably not going to make it. So I really appreciate that you have that perspective and that drive and your why firmly in your hands, because I think it's one of the most important things for success. So that's amazing. So how do you go about, selling this stuff? Are you big into like kind of wholesale? Are you selling mostly online? I mean, where are most of your customers, buying from? Just curious.
Well, it's all been online. I do have a couple of wholesale customers that one of them is monthly. I haven't pursued wholesale just yet full time. Right. I'm still putting all of that together. I do have a couple wholesale customers. One, it's a monthly order. I can count on it every month. The other one, it's here and there. But again, most of it's been retail, online, and subscription. And it's all grown through word of mouth. I advertised on a podcast once, or I sponsored a podcast once. That brought in a few sales. It was a good podcast too, but it just brought in a couple sales. But as far as ads on Facebook or search engine optimization service or Google Ads, whatever, I have paid, out of the last 5 years, I've probably paid less than $500 for all of it. I just don't do it. It's grown mostly by word of mouth. And the reason why, I don't want to wake up tomorrow and have 1,000 orders, right? I want to wake up tomorrow and have just that. I want to get to that point to where every day I'm busting my butt to meet those orders. And then I take the next step and either bring someone else in or do something that makes it maybe buy a piece of equipment that makes things a little bit more efficient. I don't want to grow too fast because I don't want to provide bad service. That's just not going to happen. So my growth has been very steady, and everything I've done has been on purpose. I said earlier that I fly by the seat of my pants, and early on I did, but now I don't, and I haven't for quite some time, because I have to make sure that what I sell I can fulfill and I can get it there very quickly, or if it's being mailed across the country, get that order out the next day. I have a lot of local customers, so that's good, but everything's grown pretty much word of mouth. I'm starting to get into wholesale very soon. Should have been there by now, but some things happened and I've had to kind of pivot a little bit. But it's going to happen soon. Probably 30 to 60 days, I'll be doing wholesale.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's really good advice. And I'll be honest, there's a question I always love to ask everybody that comes on the podcast. I'm curious to hear your answer to this too, which is basically, if you can go back to, like when you were still pre-revenue with the brand, if you could give yourself a piece of advice going into it again, if you were to do it again, what would that advice be? I'm curious to hear your answer on that. But also, one of the most common answers I get to that, especially from other CPG brands, is kind of exactly what you just emulated in what you were saying, which is basically like, don't seek to grow too fast, because when you do, if you run a bunch of ads and you wake up with 1,000 orders when you're usually, used to doing maybe like 100 to 150 a day, something is going to be lacking, whether it's the timing getting it out or the quality. If you're forced to fulfill those orders in a shorter amount of time than you used to, or, just at a capacity that you don't even have the capacity to fulfill at that day. I mean, it might take you a week to even get like the amount of product to be able to ship out, right? So that's a very common answer to that question that I get. And I think it's after 30 to 40 times you hear it, I mean, it's not anecdotal anymore. I mean, it's a very good piece of advice, I think, for anybody that's getting into a CPG brand. It's going to be a slow burn, and it's like that for a reason. And to be able to do things the right way and have good customer service and get things out the way that you want them to be, you almost have to do it that way. And I think it also allows you to be a little bit more diligent in your planning and being able to do things that way to have that steady growth, rather than you spike to 1,000 orders a day, you think it's going to last, and all of a sudden in a month's time you're back down to your 150 orders a day, right? So I think your point's very well taken there, and it's something I definitely hear from others as well. So appreciate you kind of highlighting that. And I am curious to kind of hear your answer to that question too, though. If we go back to 2019, starting the company again, if you could give yourself any piece of advice, what do you think that would be?
Like I said earlier, I flew by the seat of my pants because I had to make something happen. If I can go back and change things, I would do things a little differently. First thing I would do out the door would do a feasibility study. And I think whenever I see people in different coffee owner groups or entrepreneur groups talk about what do I need to start a business? What's the first step? How do I start a business or do a business plan? I've heard everything from you don't need a business plan. All you got to do is create a pro forma. I've heard use ChatGPT, but no one has ever brought up a feasibility study. And that's the first step, because you need to know if your idea is even valid, right? So I would have done that. And it doesn't have to be anything that's complicated or drawn out, but definitely do something like that, because that's, if your idea is good, then you take the next step, and the information that you learn in the feasibility study can be used in your business. But if it's not a good idea, then you modify it or you scrap it. So I would have done that. And then I would have focused, instead of having to create something fast in order to bring income in, I would have slowed down and focused on the fundamentals. The fundamentals in business, if you don't focus on those, if you don't get those right, and you create a business and you've got a shaky foundation, when the stress comes, it's going to fall apart. You have to have solid fundamentals. You have to have everything in place. Your foundation has to be sure, or you're fooling yourself, and it's just a matter of time before it crumbles, right? So I would have done that. I had to do everything at once because it was just me. But over time, I've sectioned out each thing that I was kind of weak on, or dove into it and learned as much as I could. I do that every day, just about. I'm weak on this. I'll spend several hours a week on YouTube learning about a particular subject. And I think that's really important, because if you're excited about a product, you can create the product, but the real discipline and the real longevity in a business is going to come from focusing on the fundamentals. Because when you have a downturn in the economy, or if, like in my case, a coffee company, if an environmental event or ship sinks with your coffee on it, or war, political issues, whatever happens in these countries that we get our coffee from, that could shut you down if you're not prepared. And if your fundamentals aren't secure, it's going to be a rough ride. So that'd be what I'd focus on first. And then just go and just slow down. I spent a lot of money that I shouldn't have had to spend because I was in too much of a hurry. So the first year, it was full of mistakes, but it was a college education for me. Just feasibility study, make sure your fundamentals are solid, and slow down, because you're not in a rush. It's not a sprint.
Yeah, no, I think it's good advice. And again, I do find a lot of commonality in your answer to other folks as well. And I think a lot of people can kind of fall into this trap of, especially the younger folks that are so influenced by social media. It's kind of hard to not be, if you're on those platforms, and all that you see is people talking about, I made $1 million in 6 months starting this, like it's so easy. It's like, well, that's not the real story. And if you look into any of those people that are posting that way, they're trying to sell you a course in the link in their bio about something else, right? So there's not really, it's really disingenuous, and but that's that's what the kind of the common stories you see out there from anybody who's successful. Like, everybody wants to paint the picture that they were an overnight success, they had the best and greatest idea, and they're trying to sell the knowledge to you through a course more often than not. So it's definitely something I'm trying to bring as a perspective, and doing this podcast with folks like you who are really actually making it work. Like everybody else that's been on this podcast, they took the time and did it the right way to have longevity in their business, not to just blow up overnight and then it's either sell the business in 6 months, or make a bunch of money and then just let it go after 6 months. So I appreciate that perspective, and it's definitely it's kind of down to earthness, I'll call it. I'm trying to bring to the table with anybody listening who might be early on in their entrepreneurial journey, or maybe is a more seasoned entrepreneur getting into a CPG venture maybe for the first time. I mean, it's just a little different, and I appreciate your perspective on that. And just want to give you a quick opportunity as well, Spencer, just to be able to mention your website, plug your social media pages, anyway, anybody that can get in touch with you, whether it's for maybe a business partnership, or somebody just interested, just wants to try the product and place an order. What's the best way to stay in touch with you guys?
Well, you can contact me through the website. My email is spencer@americanclassiccoffee.com if you want to contact me that way. Phone number's listed on the website, or should be, but email is usually the best way. If you want to contact me through Facebook, just look for American Classic Coffee, and I can be contacted that way. So I'm always available to help. So I like helping other people, and I think it's really important for me, it's really important to have a sense of fulfillment and purpose, and helping other people meets that. So I'm always available to help, answer questions. I don't know everything, but I've learned a lot through my own mistakes, and I can speak to that experience very well, because I've made a lot of mistakes. But just American Classic Coffee and Facebook is really the best way to get hold of me.
Awesome, man. Well, Spencer, I just want to say thank you again for coming on, and thank you for your service as well. Wish you the best of luck and continued success with what you're doing. I love how mission based, and I'll say it again. I mean, I love that your why and what you're doing. It's awesome. I really love it. So I just want to say thank you again for coming on, and I really look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and it's been a good time. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Spencer, and thanks everybody.